Welcome, ladies. Level up. We're glowing, we're growing, and we're conquering. And we're in our last session, which is crazy because I felt like I just started this, but we have come to session number 4. And I thought I would give you guys some production info, right? So if you're a musician and you want to get into production, it's a very interesting lane, a lane that I have had to learn pretty much on my own for the most part. And it's been very rewarding. I've learned a lot. I've also learned a lot from different people as well. Um, but a lot of my production learning was trial and error and having a MacBook and first learning how to work a MacBook because I transitioned from PC to MacBook back in 2013. So for the longest while, I had a PC and then I switched to MacBook because everybody was like, you need to get a MacBook because you'll get lots of years out of it. They were right. And so I got a MacBook in 2013 and I didn't actually start using GarageBand until I became an artist. So like 2014 ish, 2015. Yeah. And back then I was just using it for piano stuff. So GarageBand was my first production program, or DAW. So if you're not familiar with a DAW, it's a digital audio workstation. That's what it is. So there's different types of DAWs out there. So you have Pro Tools, Ableton, GarageBand, Logic Pro, Fruity Loops. I grew up on Fruity Loops. Cubase. So when I got my Yamaha S90 ES, it came with the Cubase CD. So I had Cubase. I was using Cubase for a minute and then transitioned to GarageBand and had to kind of pull apart GarageBand. And then one day I made a discovery back in 2018. I discovered this little button over here in the corner, the loop button. And it's so funny. I had the program, was not paying attention to that corner of the screen. And one day in 2018, I saw this little loop and I was like, what's this? Clicked on it. And I was like a kid in a candy store. I was like, ooh, this is nice. So I'm there looking through all the different loops and all the different instrument packs that they had and, fooled around with some stuff. But yeah, even before discovering that loop button, I had to figure out how to work GarageBand. So now I don't have GarageBand up here, but I do have Logic Pro. And the nice thing about GarageBand and Logic Pro is they're both the same. Logic Pro just has a little bit more features and more sounds that you can choose from. So making the transition from GarageBand to Logic Pro was not difficult because a lot of the features are the same. So if you are a first-time user of Logic Pro, this is one of the first screens that you'll see. So you'll have things like software instrument. So software instrument just essentially means you're going to be using the software instruments that are provided, and that's through a MIDI cable. So a MIDI cable, if you're not sure or you're not familiar with a MIDI cable, it's a cable that has one end that's kind of like a square-shaped box or a rectangle, really. And then the other end is a USB. So when you are using MIDI products like a piano or one of those smaller beat makers, so example like a Kai Mini, that's one that I use. And normally at the back of a keyboard or a MIDI keyboard or a small keyboard, you'll see a little box. So that's your MIDI input. So you'll take your MIDI card and you'll plug it into there. And then you'll plug the USB into your computer, right? So most of these MIDI keyboards come with stock sounds or like a program that you can download. But say you don't want to use the programs that come with it and you just want to use your DAW system. So you plug that into your computer and you will go to software instrument here, right? And just kind of decide how many tracks you want. You don't have to really change any of this here because that will already be, it's just a default patch. Now, if you want to change any of this stuff, this is more for software sounds. So if you're downloading different software sounds, like you want to have roll-in sounds or extra loops or whatever, then you can kind of change it so that you're using that particular sound that you downloaded. But for now, you can just leave it as default patch. And then this audio input, you can just leave it. You don't need to change anything. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Just leave it as output 1 and 2. You don't need to change that. And then here, the device would be whatever device is plugged in via USB. So whether that's your piano or your little beat tool that you're using. So I'm just going to use one track for now, and then you're going to press create. Okay. So obviously this is coming up as electric piano because that's just the default for it. So you have all of these buttons up here. So I remember when I opened up GarageBand for the first time and I'm like, what are all of these buttons? Right? Now, obviously you can hover. That's the beauty of having a mouse. You can hover and they tell you what it is, right? So you have the library. So your library contains all of your sounds, everything. Then you have the inspector tool. Okay, so the inspector tool, you can kind of go and adjust the levels, volume, all of that for whatever instrument that you're working on. You have region here and you have track. So these are just drop down menus. Go here. So if you want to loop what you've created, you can click on loop and it will make a loop. Quantize. So that's quite a term there. So if you want to quantize something, is basically you want to make sure that your whatever you're recording is on time and on beat. So here are your time signatures here, really. 1/16 of a note, 1/32 of a note. It all depends on what you want. And that will essentially line up everything for you. Or if you want to make it a triplet, or you want to have it so that it swings. Those are the options. I normally don't use any of these here. I just really go here because most of the time I'm using these to make sure that my whatever I've played into that instrument is lined up with the tempo that I've set. So I'll use, most of the time it's one of these two based on what I'm playing, because I normally play a lot of like 8th notes or 16th notes. So if I want to make sure that they are in line with the tempo, I will come and quantize it. Or most of the time I won't even quantize because I'll just make sure that I play directly with the click, right? And then the transpose button. So if you want to transpose your music, you can do that, right? Obviously I don't have anything written here, but essentially if you want to transpose it, it transposes in half steps. So if you want to transpose like a full step, you have to make sure you put 1 or +1 or +2, +3, depending on how many keys you want to transpose it. I love that because then I don't have to record it again in that key. So for example, if I wanted to create a song in the key of C and then I want to transpose to the key of D, I don't want to have to do that or record it. I can literally record it in C, and then I can go to the transpose button here and then just type in +1 and it will transpose the entire section up a key, which I love that because in the past when I didn't know about any of this, I would literally have to record every single key separately. I'm like, why am I doing this when I can literally just go in? And I didn't know at first what it was, right? Until somebody told me like, yeah, you can actually go in and transpose your section. So I said, can you show me? And they're like, yeah, you just go to the I section here and you go to region and you go to transpose and then just type in how many keys you want to transpose up. And I was like, oh, when I found that out, game changer. So when I wanted to transpose my music, I didn't have to record in C and then record in D and then record in E. All I have to do is just duplicate and then highlight and then transpose whatever section of the song, which cuts down a lot of time. Indeed. Right? So that's that section there. Here, I don't really use this because I don't have a reason to use it. And it just gives you a little bit of information here. So don't worry about that too much. This section here is just a help button. So it gives you like a little bit of pointers just in case you have a question. And it kind of tells you what to do here. And then here we have the toolbar. So anything that you need to use here, you can use it. I don't use this section at all. Here, this is one of my favorites. So here, so if I need to change the levels of any of my sounds, I can go into this little button here and change all the levels. So if I want to add more treble, more bass, more drive, right? Maybe more release, maybe some more stereo. So I can go in here, or I can press the EQ button and I can change it here as well based on what I want. Right? If I want to make it louder, I can make it louder. If I want to make it softer, if you know how to work EQ, you can definitely do that. I know sometimes I will make adjustments to any of the sounds. Most of the time, I will just use the controls that are here. If I need to make it louder, then I'll go into EQ and I'll make the adjustments. Again, most of this stuff, I don't know how it works. I just go based off of my ear. Yeah, that's that section. And then we have this section here, which is the mixer. So it's where you would mix all of your tracks. And then also, if I'm using sounds, or I have a producer that will send me sounds that I can use to, so if I don't want to use the stock sounds that are in Logic Pro, I can bring sounds from outside. And I will go to this section here called the mixer, and I will change the input. So right now it's using the stock sound input. So if I want to switch it up, I will go to this arrow, up and down arrow here, and whatever plugins, all my plugins will be listed here. So any new plugins that I've downloaded. So say I downloaded a Roland plugin. So I'll go to the Roland section and then it will give me another menu and I just choose which plugin I want to use. And the nice thing about this is you can pre-record your line of music. And then if you want to use your stock sounds that you downloaded, you'll come into this menu and you'll go to that stock sound, click the one that you want to use, and then you can literally change the sounds. So you don't have to like record. Right? Yeah. That's the beauty of MIDI, right? If you want to change the sound, you already have your stuff recorded. You can go in and change the sound and it will change the sound, right? And then you just make the small adjustments that you need to make. Obviously, it's going to be different if you're recording directly from the board, which I will show you how to do that as well too. But if you're using MIDI and you have stock sounds that you want to use, you would come into this menu and then change the input and go here and do what you got to do. So that's that button. And then there's the scissors. So this is where I will see whatever I've written here. And if I need to make adjustments, I can make adjustments. I can change the velocity, make it louder, make it softer. And the lovely thing about Logic Pro is anything that you create, it will create an entire score for you. So all the notes will come up here. And if you want to download the score and keep it for future use, you can do that as well. That's the nice thing about this. And the nice thing about DAWs is when you create music, it creates the sheet music for you. So you don't have to go in and actually, back in the day where, if you were using some of these programs and they don't have the capabilities of creating a score for you, you would literally have to write it by hand. No one has time for that. So I like that part. I mean, I don't really use scores much these days because a lot of the stuff that I create by ear. And then the score is there. So just in case, if it's a song I haven't played in a long time, I can go back and go to the score and read it because I do know how to read scores. And I can pull it up and figure out what I did. So that's the lovely thing about that. So that's that there. I don't really use these ones here. It's mostly just the piano roll. So if I need to make an adjustment, I would go into the piano roll and change whatever I need to change. And it has the piano here. So, and then you can scroll down for all the different octaves of the piano and whatever you need to change. So this is clearly more than, so C0, that should be middle C. No, it's not. Okay, this is just extra keyboard. Because I'm like, there's only 88 keys, so all those extra keys are not necessary and they won't show up. So yeah, there's that. And then obviously up here, if you want to play back, you get your playback here, your stop, forward, rewind, your record button, right? When you're recording anything, you need to make sure you highlight this, make sure it's highlighted, and then record. That way it records, right? Gives you a count in, and then everything will record on that line for you. And of course, here you have this. So if you just want to play a certain section of your creation, you can highlight the amount of bars that you want to play, and it will loop that section. And then you turn it off if you don't want to use it. Here shows you the bar number that you're at, beat 1, where beat 1 starts. Here's the metronome timing. You can change to 120. If you don't want 120, you can change it to 80 and press enter, right? You can change the time signature here as well too. And then the key. So if you want your creation in a certain key, you can set the key from here, which is lovely. I don't even do that. I really don't. But in the case of the score, so if you want to actually have access to the score and you want the score to be in a certain key, then you do need to change this. So if I want my score in D flat major, for example, then I'll make sure that when I'm recording in D flat major so that the notes come out the way that they're supposed to come out. And then this drop down menu here, if you want to show different parts of the screen, so if you just want the beats in the project, if you want beats in project large, it will make it bigger and actually show the key here. Or you can just keep the beats in the time. And that's just the elapsed time there. There's just beats, so if you just want the beats, you can show that. And if you just want the time, you can just show the time. And then custom. So custom will just open up everything for you. So it gives you the time, the bars, beats, keep the tempo. Everything is here at your disposal, and you can change where necessary. This is what I normally use custom because I want to see everything, which is lovely. Then you have this section. I don't even use this either. I don't use that. And then these are just the count in. So if I don't want to count in, I can unhighlight it. And then if I want the click, I will highlight the click, and the click will play throughout. And then your volume, you can adjust the volume here. This is the master volume. And then, of course, each individual instrument will have their own master volume as well that you can adjust. Now, for recording purposes, do not go past 3 decibels. 3 decibels is literally like the limit before it starts, like, you hear that crackling sound in your music. So most of the time, I don't go past 3 decibels, but it also depends on the sound, because some sounds you have to really like crank it up because some of the sounds are softer. Some sounds are louder, so you may have to go below, which happens. But when I'm creating, I put everything at 0, and then I just make my engineer deal with with the volume itself. Yeah. Over here, just have list. I don't even use this, to be honest. I don't think you would ever need it. Here, that's just a notepad if you want to make notes, right? And then my favorite part is the loop button, right? So all the stock loops that are in Logic Pro are all here. And then, of course, you can select by instrument and just click the instrument. And then you can just click individual. So if you want to just show different piano sounds, right? Or if you want to show all the drums that are available, that includes drum kit and drum beats. If you just want kits, and if you just want beats, you can highlight that. Then it shows all the different beats here. Now, if you want to say you want to see the genre, so you're going to highlight both of these. So I'm pressing the shift button on my keyboard, and I just highlight both. And then all the genres will show up. So I have all drums and beats, and then I can choose which genre I want to use. So there's funk, indie, chill wave, and it will just bring up only those beats, right? Because I know there's a lot of things in here. So it's always nice to be able to narrow it down. That way you don't have to try and scroll through and figure out, okay, well, I'm looking for like a hip hop type of beat. Then you could just go to instrument, go to all drums, go to beats. You can highlight the genre and then go to hip hop. And it will show you all the hip hop type beats that are here. Just makes it easier when you're trying to, find hip hop beats. You're not trying to search through the entire library. And it cuts down time. Then this button over here. Yeah. This just shows you all the files on your computer. So if you need to pull up anything, you can pull up stuff there. So those are like some of the main buttons that you would use. There's other stuff in here as well. But like I said, I didn't know anything about this. I had to, result to trial and error with a lot of these things. And honestly, that's what you should do. Just kind of go check some of the things out. Don't be afraid to, make a mistake here. Like you're just learning, especially if you don't have anybody that's, familiar with Logic Pro. Just kind of go through and see what's there. There's also great YouTube tutorials as well too. So if you really want a more in-depth explanation for certain features in Logic Pro, you can go to YouTube and type in Logic Pro 10, and there's plenty of resources on there. So that's that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some of the creations that I have created using this lovely program here. I'm going to close this because I don't need it. Okay, so a lot of the songs that I have created 2019 to present time, so circa 2019 to present time, have been out of Logic Pro. Anything before 2019 came out of GarageBand. So my first release, for example, was a GarageBand. All my releases in 2016 and 2017. My first project out of GarageBand. So shout out to GarageBand, because GarageBand was my DAW for the first 5 years of my career. And it did me justice, to tell you that. But there was a lot of things that I didn't know until after I released the project, like tempo and clicks. I was literally just going off of and then the instrumentalists that I had on my projects had to literally figure out or try to follow, because I didn't realize these things until after the fact. So again, trial and error. There's some things you don't realize until after you put out the project, and then you learn more about your DAW system and you're like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. Oh, I didn't know, maybe I should have done that. But again, you live and you learn. So all of my songs afterwards, I found out all these things that I can do. So now when I put out music, everything was on tempo, and people could easily, pick it up. And then I learned about making reference tracks, right? So it makes the process of production so much easier. So if you have a specific idea that you're looking for, you track it out yourself, and then you send that to whoever you need to send it to. That way they have an idea of what it's supposed to sound, right? Before, I was just tracking for keys. And then I learned how to, I kind of already knew how to do it, but I started working with other instruments like synths and horns and strings and bass and drums. At first, I was just using stock sounds, and I would literally take different drum patterns from different genres and I would mix them together. I would chop them up. So if I'd listened to a stock sound and I only liked a portion of the stock sound, I would chop the rest of it. And then I would combine it with something else. That's how I was making my beats. So some of the music that you'll hear was a result of that. People are like, oh, this is good. I'm like, yeah, I literally just took stock sounds and chopped them up and made my own beats out of them. So this first song here, this is called Levels. This song I wrote during the pandemic, the first year of the pandemic, April 2020 is when I wrote it. And I was sitting in my studio and I had just chilling. And normally I don't force production. I don't like setting a schedule for production because then I'm not as creative when things are forced. So I was just kind of fooling around in the key of F minor. And this melody came to me. So I'm just going to play you the keys. I'm going to highlight everything else here. And I'm going to mute. And this was the exact melody that I heard in my studio. It's literally all I heard. I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be the main like idea. And for me, I tell my stories using melodies. So I was trying to remember what happened in April 2020. I know it was pandemic times. I think it was like the first full month of the pandemic. I must have been going through something that time. Oh, you know what? 2020. Yes, that was like I was in my last year of my 20s then. And I think I was just reflecting on my life over that decade and all the obstacles I went through. So I think I was in deep thought about that. And that's how this melody came about, right? Because it's literally like, okay, I went through all these things, ups, downs, which is why I called it levels. And I spelt it without the vowels. So LVLS. So no, it took out the E's. You know, I have to be different sometimes, right? So I wanted to be different. So I took out the E's out of there. And when I play you the full thing, minus the drums, because you know, when you're transferring your music onto a different computer, sometimes some of the stock sounds don't fully come up, as you can see with some of the tracks here, like this one, for example. It's not there because, again, this is a new version of Logic Pro. So that's the other con to Logic Pro. If you're using an older version of Logic Pro and then you're trying to load your project onto a newer version, sometimes the new version doesn't have all the sounds. And this is what will happen. You'll notice that your track is blank. So you'll have to literally download everything. So for time, I just muted it so you won't hear the drums. Sorry, guys. Maybe next time. Or you can just stream the song on all streaming platforms, right? That way you can hear the entire thing. So I'm just going to mute this. So for this song, once I came up with my melody, because I literally came up with the melody first, sometimes I come up with a drum pattern first. I didn't have a drum pattern for this. I came up with the melody first. So after I came up with the melody, then I added some like auxiliary sounds. So I have this one called Curly Whirly. Oh, no, that's not what I went to. Okay, I'm gonna just mute everything else so you can hear. Okay, so we'll restart this. Go back to the beginning. So that's what I was literally hearing. I literally had this section on repeat for like the longest while, trying to figure out, okay, what am I gonna add in here? And then I heard like do 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 do. It's just arpeggiated, right? But I heard like a harp type of sound, right? So I found that in the stock sounds in the library there, and I added that. And of course, because you can duplicate and you don't have to record the entire thing, you just record the first 4 to 8 bars and then just copy and paste to make life easier, right? Then I was like, okay, well, I want to add another sound as well too, something like outer space type vibe. So I found this sound called Blue Cavern, and I added that to the mix. So like kind of like a plucking, pluck, 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 right? Just to fill in the missing gaps. So everything just kind of builds up. So you start off simple, and then I would just add in certain elements as the song goes through. So of course, bass. I added a vintage funk, so it's not like a full bass guitar. It's just like more like an electronic bass type thing, but still followed the same pattern, right? So everything is still like arpeggiated in a way. So that's kind of mimicking what the Blue Cavern is doing, but in a simplified version, right? After I did that, I heard like some ahs and oohs. So I was like, oh, let's go into the voice section. And I love the voice section because I found a chamber choir. And I was like, oh, yeah, I hear, oh. You know how some hip hop sounds have the vocals in there, but it's like program vocals? So I added that male chamber chorus in there. I don't know if it's going to play today. It might not play, but that's okay. You catch the vision. It's not playing today, but that's all good. You have to listen to the actual version of the song. So that was like the first, how many minutes in? Almost first minute. Yeah, first minute of the song, because the song is actually only 2 minutes and 7 seconds. I was in my short song era, because everybody has short attention spans, so I had to cut down the timing of my songs. All right, now we get to the fun part, which is the hook, the main hook. And then this is where I went crazy with the bass. Add the strings. Oh, this one actually. So I'm a synth person. I love synth solos. If you notice, all of my songs circa 2019 have a synth, some sort of synth solo in, because I love synths, right? So all of my songs have some sort of synth solo. So I decided to throw that in there, and then add some strings in there to give it some depth, and then add like a really funky bass line. So it has that same pattern of the arpeggio. I kept the arpeggiation throughout the song. All right. So whether that was in the keys, to the auxiliary sounds, to the bass, right? I kept that because that was the pattern mainly of this song. So yeah, if you want to check this song out on all streaming platforms, right? You guys look me up and you can listen to the actual track, right? I'm actually working on a live version of this coming soon. So it's a live extended version, because people were complaining, why was it only 2 minutes? I said, well, because there's a part 2. Right? So that's that song. I'm going to close this. No, we're not going to save it. And I'm going to open my recent release, Chilly Timing. And again, back to the whole, I'm transferring my older version of Logic into a newer version of Logic. So most of my sounds are missing. So you're just going to get mostly keys and auxiliary sounds and bass today. So, and the intro is going to be missing, but that's okay. So with this song, I also wrote this one during the pandemic. I actually wrote this, I'm trying to remember when. Might have been later on in the year. I'm thinking fall 2020. So this one actually started with strings. It's so funny. When I wrote this song, it was never called Chilly Timing. It was actually called something else. I called it something else, and I got inspiration from the Proud Family, right? The Proud Family theme song. that kind of sounded like a little bit, but I heard like a lot of strings, but they were like, what's the term for? It's kind of like kind of like I forgot what they call it. I think it's a tremolo. I think that's what it's called. A tremolo. So like you're trembling. Yeah, that's what it's called. So that's what I heard in the beginning. And when you listen to the actual track, you'll hear the tremolo, the trembles. And then I actually came up with the strings first, believe it or not. Normally that doesn't happen. Normally it's either keys or it's like the drum pattern. But with this one, I came up with the strings first. And then I came up with the piano. So I can't play the strings right now, but I will play the piano line here because it's available. Yeah, so me and my weird self, because I'm weird, and I come up with weird things and in weird chord progressions. And people will probably ask me, what key is that in? You're gonna have to figure it out. That's how I write. I'm outside the box. I don't do what typical people would do. So that's what I would did with this one. I'll continue so that we can hear the bass. There's the synth line again. And then I ended with so a lot of my production has to do with sound design and just figuring out what sounds to use, right? That is always something that's important to me. But it also just depends on what kind of sound you're going for. Now, I said earlier that this song was not called Chili Timing. I just changed it recently before I released it because I gathered inspiration from the types of winters Canada has. All the switching up, and 1 minute it's cold, 1 minute it's warm, and 1 minute we're getting ice pellets, next minute we're getting rain. So this was just like an ode to Canadian winter. So I changed the title to Chili Timing because it gives off that kind of energy with all like the particular sound. Where is it? I think it's the smooth and gentle there. It has kind of an airy sound to it, like right, which is the sound of winter, right? And then you have the strings that come in. The trembling is like shivering, right? And then like the beat is like the kind of, it switches up a little bit. So that's like how I describe Canadian winter, because the weather keeps switching up, right? It's never consistently winter, right? So the thing about my songs is I'll write these songs sometimes with the intention of not releasing it. And then I'll go back and be like, oh, I'll get inspiration for what the song is actually supposed to be, right? I think I called this Bittersweet. That's what I called it. And then when I was getting ready to release music, I knew that I wanted to, create a song that was an ode to winter. And then mind brought me back to this song, and I listened to it again, and I was like, oh yes, this is the one. This is the one. Right? It gives off winter vibes. And it's funny, when I played it for somebody, they're like, yeah, you're right. This does gives off winter vibes. You can hear like the tremble, right? When the strings and all that. So yeah, that was the inspiration behind that song. And to date, it's almost at 5,000 streams on Spotify. I mean, I released it in March. So that's like 2.5 months. 2 months. Yeah, 2 months it's been out. Yeah. So, I mean, I just released it. So I'm pretty proud of that 5,000 streams that it has. Let's get it to 10. Yeah. Okay, so that's that song. I have one more song to share with you guys. The song is actually an unreleased song. That means it has not come out yet, but you're just getting the reference track today. You're not going to get the actual sound. Not yet. You have to wait. So there's a lot going on in this song here. But also, this is a song that I also wrote during the pandemic early on, like summertime 2020. And because I play multiple instruments, I had to make sure I had a horn section. I don't think any of the songs that I have released to date have horns in them. I'm trying to think back to actually. No? Yep. So when this song does come out, it'd be one of the first that have actual horn section. And I think that I've always wanted to have horns in my songs. So I made sure that I created songs that had horns in them. So I'm just gonna mute some stuff here so I can just play you the horn section. Okay. Right. Yeah. Just turned up the master. Yeah. Okay. Gotta love horns. Love horns. So I'm gonna add the flutes back in there. And then I'm gonna add the bass as well. And then I also used a bunch of different drums here. I used like 3 different types of drums. Crystal pad, trip hop, which came out of the chill wave section, systemic. And then I also have like a tambourine in there because I wanted like a consistent like throughout. So, oh, oopsie. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's run that back. And I hear that flute is sounding like a piano. Okay, so then we're going to go back and we're going to adjust. This is what we do, guys. Okay, flute. And then if that happens, you just go back and you make the adjustment, right? V. And then we're going to mute that. And here we go. Oh, oops. Don't you love when that happens? That is not what it's supposed to sound like, but that's okay. And that's okay. There's a reason why I'm only going to show you a portion of it. You'll have to wait until it actually comes out. But yeah, if that happens and you're getting some weird sounds, just duplicate the sound by pressing Command D and then going back into the stock sound that you used and click on it, and it should work, and you can just copy and paste if that happens. But yeah, that's just a little snippet of that song. The full version will be coming soon, so wait for it. Don't save. So yeah, that's basically, Logic Pro. There's so much stuff, so much more things that I'm learning as well too with it, but I'm doing what I can. And, don't get frustrated if you're not getting certain things. Like I said, you can go on YouTube and you can watch the tutorials. They're great tutorials. You can also ask people who use Logic Pro on a regular to give you, some pointers. But as long as you know how to plug in your MIDI instrument and you know how to find your stock sounds, you know how to record, you know how to use the click, you know how to change the tempo or change the key. Those are like the most important things. And then also find the loop button. And yeah, that is a little bit of production from my perspective, but also a little bit of a breakdown of what Logic Pro and what a DAW is. So for your future productions, you have an idea of what to use.